Hey guys, what's up? It's Seth with indemandcareer.com and Skip College for Success. I teach people how to get jobs in digital marketing with no previous experience or education. And today, I wanted to talk to you about the word boss. Um, I'm a big advocate for people pursuing their passions and for financial freedom and mental, emotional freedom. And I would like to encourage you to consider eliminating the word boss from your vocabulary. I don't mean boss if you're saying like, oh, that was such a boss movie I just saw. Wow, I sound lame. But what I mean is in terms of work, this idea that you have a boss. Like you might be working at a job right now, and what you actually have is a supervisor. Now, before I got into digital marketing and was able to travel the world running my own business, I worked lots of jobs, and some of the jobs were okay, and some of them were terrible. I waited tables. I was what they call a laser range safety officer. I did data entry. I worked as an accountant, and in every job I had a supervisor. But I was very careful. I never called that person my boss. Okay, even when I worked as an accountant and I had a supervisor, Jim, who I love this guy. He was great. But he was like a boss, like out of the office. Remember, because he really enjoyed the power of having the, supervising position and his ability to, bring people into his office and whatnot. And I just never related to him like he was my boss. Like he's my supervisor. What does supervisor mean? Supervisor simply means the person who is in a management position and is, in charge of overlooking your work, like you're on a team. And I think that's a much more powerful way to look at it. So I don't care if you're flipping burgers or you work in an office or you work in a warehouse. Don't call that person who is your supervisor your boss. Because they're not your freaking boss. You're your boss. You are your own boss in life. And this is one of those little things in our culture. If you look at the sort of collective culture, the way that the average person or the average magazine or blog or CNN or Fox News, they talk about work, it is such a nasty world. It's just so disempowered. It's like, oh, we have to work and we have to go to work and this is how life is and maybe someday we'll retire and we have a boss and oh, if we don't like our boss, that's too bad. And then you relate to this boss person like they're somehow in control of your life. Now, of course, you might be on a job and you may not love the job. You might not even, be unhappy at the job. You might have a supervisor who isn't a good supervisor. Maybe they're self-centered. Maybe they're bossy, as the word implies. Maybe they're not considerate. And maybe they treat you in a way that you don't like. Well, here's what I'm saying, and I can go into more detail on this, but say you have absolutely no power in your relationship with your supervisor if you think of them as your boss. That's what I'm saying. Suddenly you are now the student and they are this teacher and you're like a 6-year-old and you're like, oh, I hope I get permission to go to the bathroom. I hope I'm a good boy. I hope I can take time off of work. Will my boss like me? Will my boss not like me? There's so much approval and childish crap mixed up in that word, and I don't support it. So, because then people disempower themselves, like, well, my boss does this, my boss does that, and then the boss has all the power in how you're thinking about things. Now, again, there might be things where the boss really does have the power, like the boss says you have to stay late, or the supervisor says you have to stay late, and you have to stay late for whatever reason. You have to deal with that. But the word boss also keeps people in a position where they don't want to have direct conversations with this person. And they become like a child. Like I said, they're like, oh, they become really intimidated. It's absurd. This is just another person. They don't control your life. And at the end of the day, even though, jobs are related to money, you are still a human being with a soul and a heart and a brain and a mind, and you can make changes in your life. And this person is not your freaking boss. So it's one of my pet peeves when I hear people talk with day jobs is when they're saying, oh, my boss does this. It's like, they're not your God. They're not your overlord. Stop calling them your boss. Supervisor. It's a much better word, because they probably are. They're probably supervising you. Maybe, maybe they do, maybe they don't. There's all sorts of different jobs out there. But I always liked that word. It felt like it put everything on an even keel. And I'll tell you guys, language is very powerful in how you think. I have a very close friend who is from Vietnam, and she was explaining to me in the Vietnamese language, it's all the within the language itself are statuses. So like if you're older and a younger person is addressing an older person, they have to use language that dictates respect. Now, on the one hand, I think it's kind of a good thing because in our culture, I think we're a little bit disrespectful. But I also don't think it's good because there's no freedom in that. You don't have the choice to choose how you want to address somebody. You have to speak. You have to. It's very much lower to upper, upper to lower, and it's based on age and class and all sorts of things. And inside of that way, within the language itself are these power. It's very disempowering, I think, if you would say if you're a young person, you are put in a position where you think you're less than an older person. Just by the way you have to say your words, the way that the diction, the way that the grammar, everything works together. And in English, and in Western language, we don't have that. There's maybe like gender assignments and whatnot, but you don't have to, a call. You don't have to, even at work, whatever you call your supervisor, whether you call each other by your first name, you have to call them Mr. or something. You don't have to do like a big show where you're like, oh, you are my superior. They're your supervisor. They're a human being. They're just another person. So, to me, this is an important thing because a lot of you guys watching, you have jobs, and you're on the path to either getting a better job, a better career, or you want to start your own business. But this is very important to say while you're on the job. This is why whenever I was at jobs, I always, it took me a while to get into this position because there were times where I thought about my boss and I had a very disempowered relationship and I felt like, they're above me. And when I started thinking of them as my supervisor, I don't know, I felt much more relaxed when I would talk to them. And I'll tell you some more stories about that, about the times at work. Tell you, when I used to work, the more obnoxious, I'd say obnoxious, maybe that's a little harsh, but like the more confident, the more I really didn't give a shit about, pleasing the boss, the better I did every time. That's not to say I did a bad job, but it had to do more with my attitude and my sense of being relaxed and self-expressed at work, which is what my intention with this video is to say is that one of the things you can do, there's a lot of other things you can do, is start changing how you think about that relationship. And you'll find that if you just take that little shift from thinking of this person as my boss, this is my supervisor, a lot of meaning and a lot of emotional charge can go away because then you don't feel like you have a taskmaster. You can think of it more like, this is just a person who's evaluating my work or is the head of the department or whatnot. That's it. Doesn't mean anything else. They don't really ultimately have power over me in my life. They might be able to tell me certain things at work about what I can and can't do as far as times, but they don't control my life or who I am or how I think or any of these things. Because when I hear people talk about their jobs, they act like, when they talk, oh, my boss, this, it's like you're talking, it's like you're a 3-year-old, you're talking, oh, my dad says I can't go out this weekend. Oh my God, I have no power. And that's one of the problems I have with the American, workplaces in general. I think there's a lot of those relationships and power dynamics from school where you're an infant all throughout school. You're always looking for approval from the teacher. It just gets transferred into the workplace. And so, and it takes people, this is another reason, is I'm doing my new course. I'm creating a new course about how to create courses and have passive income from your passion and create your own business. It took me years to shift my mindset away from a worker mentality into an entrepreneurial mentality and actually be successful with it. And this was part of it. This was part of my path. So, small thing you can do. I hope that's helpful. If you have a thought, comment, response, criticism, whatnot, please post a comment below the video. I'm really interested in what you guys think of this, if it's helpful or not. And this is Seth with indemandcareer.com, and I will see you soon.